Welcome to the call to holiness. Following God's presence and power, the people of Israel stood at the edge of destiny. Behind them lay the wilderness, a place of testing, discipline, and preparation. Ahead of them stretched the promised land, a land flowing with milk and honey, yet occupied by powerful nations. To cross the Jordan and enter into God's promise, one thing was required: holiness. Holiness begins with following God's presence. As they camped near the Jordan River, the officers moved through the camp, proclaiming a sacred command. When ye see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God, and the priests the Levites bearing it, then ye shall remove from your place and go after it. Joshua 3 verse 3. The ark of the covenant symbolized God's presence among his people. Israel was not to rush ahead or choose their own direction. Instead, they were to follow God's presence, stepping only where he led. Holiness requires submission, walking in obedience, not by personal ambition, but by divine guidance. In our lives today, holiness still means pursuing God's presence. It means going where he leads, not where our emotions or desires pull us. Only those who follow him fully can step into the promise he has prepared. Holiness prepares us for elevation. As the people readied themselves, the Lord spoke directly to Joshua. This day will I begin to magnify thee in the sight of all Israel, that they may know that, as I was with Moses, so I will be with thee. Joshua 3 verse 7. God does not elevate individuals for their own glory, but to fulfill his divine purpose. Joshua's faithfulness and obedience set him apart, allowing God to establish his leadership before the entire nation. Holiness is what distinguishes God's people. It is not about personal perfection but about being set apart for God's use. When we commit ourselves to holiness, we position ourselves for God to magnify his power through us, not for our recognition, but so that others may see and trust him. Holiness requires a step of faith. The Lord then gave Joshua a clear command for the priests. And thou shalt command the priests that bear the ark of the covenant, saying, When ye are come to the brink of the water of Jordan, ye shall stand still in Jordan. Joshua 3 verse 8. Imagine the scene. The Jordan River was at flood stage, its waters rushing and overflowing its banks. To the natural eye, it seemed impossible to cross. But God required an act of faith. The priests had to step into the water before the miracle could happen. Holiness always demands faith. It requires trusting God's instructions, even when they don't make sense. It means being willing to step out in obedience, even before we see the waters part. Holiness invites the power of the living God. Joshua then reassured the people with a powerful declaration. Hereby ye shall know that the living God is among you, and that he will without fail drive out from before you the Canaanites, and the Hittites, and the Hivites, and the Perizzites, and the Girgashites, and the Amorites, and the Jebusites. Joshua 3 verse 10. Holiness is not just about moral purity. It is about being in alignment with God's power. The Israelites did not have to defeat their enemies by their own strength. The living God would go before them. In our lives, holiness allows us to experience God's presence, power, and victory. It is the key to overcoming obstacles, breaking strongholds, and walking in divine authority. When we walk in holiness, we invite the supernatural power of God to work in our midst. Holiness precedes miracles. Finally, the moment came. And it shall come to pass, as soon as the soles of the feet of the priests that bear the ark of the Lord of all the earth, shall rest in the waters of Jordan, that the waters of Jordan shall be cut off from the waters that come down from above, and they shall stand upon an heap. Joshua 3 verse 13. The miracle did not happen before they stepped into the water. It happened as soon as their feet touched the flood. Holiness is a step of faith that leads to divine breakthrough. Too often we wait for God to act before we move. But God calls us to move in obedience first, and then he performs the miracle. The Jordan River parted. The waters stood still, piled high like a wall, and the people walked across on dry ground. Just as he had done at the Red Sea, God proved himself faithful to those who were set apart for him. Conclusion: the call to holiness today. The message of holiness is not an ancient principle. It is a present-day calling. 1. Holiness means following God's presence rather than making our own way. 2. Holiness prepares us for divine elevation, setting us apart for His purpose. 3. Holiness requires faith, stepping forward even when the waters look overwhelming. 4. Holiness invites God's power, allowing Him to fight on our behalf. 5. Holiness precedes miracles, opening the way for supernatural breakthroughs. God is still calling His people to holiness today. The question is, will we sanctify ourselves, step forward in faith, and trust that the living God is among us? Will we sanctify ourselves and step forward in faith, trusting that the living God is among us?